Welcome to my channel, my friend. My name's David, and this is the David Cowan Show. And when I first started this channel, I wanted to incorporate some sort of a segment where I interviewed people from different walks of life who are making an impact on the world. And I've hit this point in my life now where, or in the channel growth, should I say, where I think it's a little bit more apt that I start this. And today I'm delighted to introduce a friend of mine to the channel. Her name's Liza Florida. And Liza is a real estate professional, entrepreneur, and the host of the 8 Billion podcast, where she interviews ordinary people living extraordinary lives and shares stories and messages of hope and inspiration in the realms of personal, spiritual, and professional development. Welcome, Liza. How are you today?
I'm doing well, David. Thanks for having me on your show. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. And you're very welcome. Thanks for coming. So
Oh.
let's get started with the 8 Billion podcast. Tell me about the podcast and also what the events and thoughts were in the lead up to you starting that podcast.
So I started the 8 Billion podcast in October of 2020. The premise of it was to really interview inspiring people, like ordinary people living extraordinary lives. And the reason that I started that podcast is I went through something very similar. I had a professional career, in real estate for 22 years. I still do it. However, there was just a part of me that wanted to be able to share my journey. And I thought, what better way to be able to share this by sharing other people's stories. So in essence, I started off first too as live streaming in the summer. So I went on an app and it was called Kumu, and I was interviewing and spotlighting people, organizations, and causes. And from there, other people had suggested I might start a podcast. So I did in October 2020. And then from there, I just started interviewing people. So I've been fortunate enough to interview best-selling authors, TEDx speakers, just really amazing people that do work in the community. So it's been a wide variety of individuals who I've been able to have the honor of interviewing.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And what would you say is the biggest learning that you've had from some of the people that you've interviewed so far?
Well, I would say, I've been asked that question many times if there's any like special like interviews that I've had, but probably like the biggest message that I've had in there is a lot of people that have decided to follow their purpose and passion when they start serving others. I think like the blessings just come back because uh, it's definitely something where it's more fulfilling in life, and it's hard, as professionals. We often, it's hard when we have to follow like our career paths because a lot of it is dependent on the income that we get. And so a lot of people truly question whether they can actually stop their careers and start living life through their passions. I know you did something very similar to that. So I
Yeah.
didn't necessarily end my career in terms of real estate, but I definitely want to heavily pursue this project, this 8 billion project.
Yeah. No, I can completely resonate with that. I was a bit stupid with my thing. I kind of just jumped into the deep end. But you live and you learn.
No, and you really do, and I've done that several times in my life. I didn't have like a complete like straight through 22 years. It was a family business, and so I was always embedded in it because my family did it. But there were times like, yeah, I stepped away from the family business. So
Mm.
I was just fortunate that my mother and my brother were doing it, and so I was deeply like I'm surrounded by it.
Yeah. I think it's one of the biggest challenges I would say a lot of people face is finding time to work on their passion outside of work, because we all live pretty busy lives, and whether we have family or other responsibilities, making time for that, I guess if it's important enough, then people will make time for it. I think is the underlying kind of idea there. but it's not an easy thing to do. And, you know, I commend you for being able to, you know, step away from the business at some point, and, you know, enough for you to get this thing off the ground.
Yeah, no, it's never like it, and that's the thing. It's like never perfect. And I was thinking and reflecting on that today, right? Like you sometimes it might be that you completely stop your career and you know, and really go into following your passions, or sometimes you'll just do it as a side hobby and then you'll figure it out as you go. And I think that's the beauty of the journey, right? Like sometimes there's a need or for you to completely like drop everything. And I've done that. I've done that maybe even 10 years ago. I left like the family business shortly. I pursued a project, a tech project. And then I also wanted to do some work in the Philippines, and I did that. And that, you know, that was hard. But then I also came back, and that, like I was saying, it's the beauty of the journey where it's not always going to be a straight path of always success. Sometimes it takes the failures or, you know, the setbacks to actually grow from it. And then to be honest with you, when I wanted to pursue this again in 2020, you know, all those things of like the memories of me doing things and it not working out kind of flooded back. But what ended up happening was when I started to realize that I wanted to be more of service to people, it didn't matter about what my successes and my failures were. What mattered most is helping others. And that actually became more of the reason why I could turn on the camera and talk, because every time right before I would do that, I would always like say a prayer or meditate. And I always knew that I wasn't doing this for myself. I was doing it for others. And then from there, it kind of took off.
Yeah, it really comes down to when you remove that, not to say to remove the responsibility, but when you remove the, I guess, the pressure that you put on yourself, thinking about like what are other people going to think or whatever it is, and you kind of focus on the impact that video or that podcast or whatever action it is that you're taking in that moment is going to have on other people, then obviously it's less about you and it's more about others then. And I think that's one of the biggest lessons that people could learn on this journey is it's not really thinking of themselves too much. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
In that respect, because the more you think about yourself, the more you worry about, oh, what's my hair going to look like? Or what's my outfit going to look like? Or am I going to be nervous on stage or whatever it is? But when you're focusing on your audience, you know, that's when the magic happens. And that's, I guess it's, you know, things just flow smoother.
Mm-hmm. Because you never know. I mean, like this video, someone could come across it in 3 years from now, and it might resonate. It might not resonate right now while we're taping this, but what if it does for them 3 years from now? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But I think on a global scale in 2020, it really forced many of us, if not the whole world, to really, truly reflect on everything. You know, and so I think it was so much more about, I think I kept even saying it on my social media, on like IG, is like, use your creativity. Like this is that time to really, you know, use your creativity in serving others, or, you know, like for you, probably it's music.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, 2020 was a crazy year for everyone involved. But what it really did, if for people that were at least aware enough to kind of figure it out, was that it offered them the time that they probably didn't have. You know, we all need that time to really reflect on our life and the choices we've made. And oftentimes when we're working 40, 50, 60 hours a week, we don't get that time. And then we've got the other responsibilities. But 2020, you know, some places are still in lockdown. So 2020 really afforded people the time to think about what they really wanted to do with themselves. And I think, and look, it's not over yet, you know, people are still in lockdown, but if anybody's listening who hasn't really taken the time to think about that, now would be a really good time to do that if you don't enjoy your job.
Yeah. And you can, and like I said, you don't have to completely drop your career. Like you could just start doing the things that you love to do. You know, it starts there. You
Absolutely.
know, yeah. Right. Some people, like I did my live streaming shows like on Saturday night. And then during the week, you know, I just, you know, worked or did other things while we were in lockdown. So stayed home and worked from home.
Yeah. So what were the live streamings about?
So I did the same thing. I was just like, oh, let me just go find some people. So I really have this heart for the Philippines. I'm Filipino by ethnicity. but I was born here in the United States. And then in 2010, I went back and visited. I think I went with my dad, and I just like really saw. I was going through a spiritual awakening, and so what I wanted to do was just like really connect with the people. And so I found that like either sitting down with relatives or just talking to strangers, like I knew that there was so much more to it than like this physical part of it, and it was just more about the connection. And then as I was there, I wanted to do just more volunteer work, specifically maybe like with women and children. And then fast forward 10 years later, here I was, I found myself on a live streaming app that, was like a Filipino live streaming app. And now it's like really global. There's a lot of people that have jumped on it. And just, you get on there and you start your channel. And then for me, you could just, in general, you could get on the live streaming app and just talk. And then people will start going into your room. I specifically chose to interview certain people and just connect with them and share. Initially, I shared Filipino Americans here, and then I interviewed them. And then I started making friends in the Philippines and interviewed them and met some really amazing people, including like a filmmaker who actually won Best Documentary Film at Manhattan Film Festival. So it was just really neat trying to navigate through, the platform and just meeting people, especially during the pandemic.
Yeah, I'd imagine there was no better time to online. Yeah, just nobody, everything exploded. Zoom's share price went through the roof, or I don't know if they're actually publicly listed, but I know their revenue went through the roof.
Yeah, and it was crazy because you think like, well, I spent for me my time in the pandemic was just between me and my son, right? And there's so many people that really were alone, and so they jumped on the live stream and then they created families virtually, and it was really neat to kind of see like the love and the support that comes through, especially during these times. It really does. These times really do make you think about life, and reflect on them.
Yeah, yeah. I think no matter who you are, it doesn't matter really what journey you've had. Everybody reflects on life at some point, and I think 2020 would have been a huge one for people.
Yeah.
For obvious reasons.
Yeah, it's like a global consciousness that's arising or has already started.
Yeah, well, you mentioned that you had a spiritual awakening, 11 years ago or so, and I think a lot of people are in that position now, and I think 2020 was a big one for people where I had mine a few years ago, but I know a lot of people that had theirs last year, and I would say that's just, I don't know if we've hit that tipping point yet where it's just like, the avalanche, but I think we're getting close in the next year or two probably, because it's been quite a crazy experience. And I wanted to ask you, what was your spiritual awakening like? Can you give me a little bit of a brief outline of the story and what was going through your mind as you were experiencing it?
So for me, for those that are, I know the audience comes from everywhere in the world, but I came from, like I said, real estate. And in 2008 was like the big mortgage meltdown. So our business was heavily affected. However, we had like, we have like this experience in specialized assets. But with that comes, sometimes spiritual awakening, what ends up happening prior to that is a lot of pain. And so when sometimes your life is defined either by career and money, and that's all you know, and then all of a sudden things start crumbling down, very similar to like what happened in the pandemic. You start to question everything, right? Because now you don't have the money like you used to, or you're like hanging on to dear life to like keep everything intact, and you can't. And so for me, that's kind of like what was happening. And so I questioned like so many different things. And yeah, sometimes it's a dark period, and it's just something internally that happens when you're going through so much pain. You kind of question a lot of things, and then from there you go on your search and you start searching for things, and you start coming to certain ideas and ideas in life about what life is really meant to be. So that became a series of different things that I did, including traveling to the Philippines and, like I said, connecting with different people. I started realizing that we're all spiritual beings having a physical experience. That's
Yeah.
why some of the, right? So some of the, I think, or they always say what? When the student's ready, the teacher will appear. And you just have these theories of people that you meet, and then they start to enlighten you. And they share with you, and then it's up to you to define it, because like there was times that, you know, I'm going to the Philippines, and then I would stop in China and then celebrate, you know, Chinese New Year. So then that was really cool because there's the Buddhist practice. And, you know, like I said, you just, when you start going on that spiritual journey, it's amazing what happens when you're in search of it, because like the people, the circumstances, situations will just start to evolve where you'll find answers.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what happened. I had to, you know, and then I also had some coaches over here. They were into the new thought, you know, the new thought. And yeah, I just did a lot of personal development and coaching. They kind of go synonymous with each other, right? In a way, personal
Yeah,
development, one triggers the other.
absolutely. Yeah. It's very interesting how certain decisions you make end up in, I guess, manifesting other things or people into your life in terms of personal development and spirituality, because they do go hand in hand. When Because the chakra system is something that I'm kind of a little bit familiar with, but my understanding is that, you know, we all have these chakras in our body, and depending on how blocked, they could be blocked, or they could be, you know, they're all spinning at a certain, I guess, speed, and they
Yep.
can either be underspinning or overspinning, and even overspinning is not good. But, you know, most people, I think, have blocked chakras, but I think that when when your when your chakras are all aligned, then your energy flows really well, and at that point, your vibration, I think, is probably, I would say, you've reached this pretty high vibration that not many people reach.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And in a way, it's kind of up to you, like, because I would say, like, yeah, I reached this height of like a spiritual awakening, and then again there was many years that I just went back into my profession and just worked. And so that, you know what I mean, then again you start experiencing things, and I feel like sometimes the universe just gets louder and louder as it's asking, it's like knocking at your door. So in a way, I think, you know, I'm still trying to figure out, is it truly like fate and destiny that you're really meant to awaken, and then there's just a series of events that happen to trigger those awakenings. And I think there is this one in particular, I believe, with like 2020 happening, it was meant for everyone to like wake up to some degree. So we're all here to hold space for that conscious awakening for everyone to have. That's why I had the 8 billion podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, they say hindsight's 2020. You know, 2020 vision's perfect vision. So it's kind of interesting that, and and I still see it these days, you know, today. But a lot of this, every night last year when I was playing music or something, I'd look at the clock and it'd be 2020. You know,
Mhm.
it was quite funny. And
That's so cool though.
yeah, a lot of repeating numbers. I just saw 1111, you know, not long ago, just after we started this interview.
When did you start seeing those numbers?
So
I'm all taking this around and
yeah, just take over the interview. No, I'm playing.
when did
So
you start seeing those numbers?
actually, it was a really big wake up call. I was in Melbourne, and it was like the end of 2018, and I'd kind of had 2017 for me was, I think, the start of I want to say the start of the spiritual awakening, but I know it started long, long before then. But 2017 was, I would say, the worst year of my life. And
Okay.
a lot of crazy stuff happened during that year. But 2018 was the first year that things started to turn around, things started to get interesting, and I started noticing, having a lot more experiences with the universe that I actually consciously created instead of unconsciously creating them. And I woke up one morning, I think it was about 7 o'clock on the weekend, and I turned on my phone and it said 11:11. So it was nowhere near 11 o'clock. And that obviously caught my attention. So I don't think I saw it too many times after that, but then the year after, that was when I just started seeing them everywhere. And,
Mhm.
you know, it would be 10, 10, 11, 11, 13, 13, 12, 12, like all those ones, all the way up to, or I'd be practicing drums and I'd put on my stopwatch. And for whatever reason, every time I'd look down at it, there'd be a repeating number. So
Yeah.
it'd be like, sometimes I'd play drums for an hour or something. So like, I'd see 111 and then I'd see 11, 11, then 22, 22, 33, and all the way up to 55, 55. It was crazy. And that was when I started noticing them a lot more. And I have a friend who sent me a website where it tells you what these numbers mean, the angel
Yeah.
numbers. And that was really interesting. I kind of looked into my birth date and all those things, that are surrounded you, the time you were born or the day that you were born and the year you were born, and added them all up to figure out I don't know what it's quite
Oh,
called.
your life path
Maybe,
number,
yeah,
life path.
my life, yeah, something like that, or your creator number or something like that, or anyway,
Hmm. Or
it
what
gives
you're
you,
meant to do.
yeah, it gives you a lot more information and about, who you are. And it was really interesting. I mean, that could sound very esoteric to a lot of people, and it's just a number. When it was my birthday in 2019, and I saw 2222 the night before, and I was telling mom, she's like, so what do you want to do with your life? You kind of, this was before I got into copywriting. This is before I was kind of working part-time uh,
Mhm.
with an online business, just doing support work and stuff and emails. And I said, oh, I've started seeing these numbers. And at that point, I think I'd started writing my spiritual awakening book, which I'll release at some point in the next couple of months, I'd imagine. But I told her about the repeating numbers. And I said, this is going to sound crazy, but I'm seeing these numbers and they're telling me that I'm on the right path. And I looked at the
Mhm.
table number and it was 22.
Yeah.
And it was really odd, because you could choose any table you want in a restaurant.
Yeah. Right.
And we happened to choose that one, and it was 22. So, and she's just sitting there looking at me like I'm nuts and just going, okay, it's just a number, whatever, 22, whatever. But, it means a lot. It means a lot to the person that's involved. And I think that's one of the biggest, like we were talking over the weekend about the biggest things that it's difficult to explain to people what a spiritual awakening is like, or the experiences that you've had, uh, because they haven't experienced them themselves,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
But
Or like,
it's like trying to describe what the color blue looks like, to
yes.
explain that to somebody. It's very hard to do, you know.
Like for me, I feel like I was having it and no one else was. So I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going on here? And then you're in search of all these things and then you start sharing it and then you realize they're not seeing it. And there's no good or bad. It's just they're not in that on that same journey or jumped into the matrix per se or down that rabbit hole. And
Mm.
so I I learned as time goes by to kind of uh just you have to understand who you're talking to so then you can kind of speak at that level and then from there you kind of gauge if they know a little bit more and then then as time goes by you'll realize whether they understand what you're talking about but it was definitely sometimes challenging and very dark because not many people I felt like around me understood what I was going through. And it's very much internal. It might not be really even that bad from in the grand scheme of things of people looking from outside to in, like from outside, but inside it's really, yeah, you really question a lot of things. And
Yeah.
so
Do you think that most people, I would say this is true for most people, although I haven't asked everyone, but would you say that it's true for most people that experience a spiritual awakening that they go through some point where they really just don't know who they are anymore?
mhm,
Yeah, you
for
think that's
sure.
quite common?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've read certain things like you'll see some posts on like Instagram where it's just like the path of someone that has dark night of soul. Like you almost retreat from everyone. You don't want to be around people like your friends,
Yep.
the friends that you used to have are no longer the same friends that you want to hang out with.
Mm.
Um, yeah, you're just really going. you're just really going through something, and then you kind of want to be alone because you're questioning a lot of things, and like surfacey conversations don't really appeal to you, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, you'd rather be alone and just do your own thing or read and learn more, as opposed to, kind of just having, shallow conversations and surfacey stuff. Stuff is not a good word, but
No,
what better word?
I understand what you mean. I think that with the spiritual awakening, because you said there's so much pain, and I can definitely agree to that. In the lead up or during or whenever it is,
Mhm.
there's also a level of depression that comes with it, and I think, well, I experienced that, and I think that part of the reason why you want to be alone is because you are feeling so depressed that you don't really want to see anyone. You're just like, "Oh, I just want
Mhm.
to do my own thing," and kind of it. Did you know that you were going through a spiritual awakening as it was happening, or was that something that you worked out later on?
Um, it, I didn't initially know it. And then, like I said, I would talk to different people. Like when the students ready, teacher will appear. It was just like I had these series, and around it was built around some of like these personal development programs. There was one
Mm.
guy who's like a shaman, and he goes, "I think it's happening for you." I was like, "Well, what's happening for me?"
Yeah, because
He was,
my life seems like it's going to shit right now.
yeah, he was like he knew it, and yet I think what he was doing as like a dear friend was holding space. But you have to come to the conclusion, you know what I mean? But
Yeah,
sometimes it it will take other people to help guide you, and sometimes it's confusing. Sometimes people would say things, and then it starts to click. Like everything is energy. What do you mean everything's energy?
mm,
And then you start reading more about it. So, you know, especially when I have like friends or family, when I know that they're going through it, you just kind of hold space for that. You don't judge it. You know, you just hold space for them to awaken and love them through the process.
yeah. I think judging is one of the biggest traps I think that most people get into anyway, because it's human nature to judge, and judging how you're feeling or whatever it is in that moment. Like maybe you're depressed or something. Like I don't want to feel depressed, but the more you resist it, the more depressed you get, or the longer it stays around. Uh, I think that's a really good point to make. Is that to accept it? It is what it is in that moment, and the easier you accept it, so the quicker you can accept it, the faster you can probably move through it.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. In a way, there's a part, I think we were talking about it one time, where you're saying like the ego is you know what I mean? So you're fighting until like you surrender to what it is. And then when you
Yeah,
surrender, that's when you can truly start your enlightened path. But if
yeah,
you're constantly fighting it, it's not gonna, I don't think it's gonna happen. You'll have a series of events and experiences that will keep pushing you back into awakening.
mm,
And that's what they say, right? Once you go down that rabbit hole, you can't like not come, you know what I mean? Like get out of it. You will continue to keep searching until you find your answers. That's what I found. That's very common. So whether it's you look for all your answers and find them in 1 year, or it takes you a series of 10 years, you will never stop searching. Once I feel like the light is triggered in you, it won't go out. You'll continue to search and search till you get your answers. Yeah, like whether there's a big gaps in between.
yeah. I feel like there are obviously many stages of a spiritual awakening, and I think that when you as you go through your stages, you can kind of, if you stop searching, then you kind of, I guess, go back to sleep again in some ways.
Mhm.
Um, but if you do persevere, and it's difficult because when I was going through mine, my life literally fell to shit. Like it was just everything wasn't working, and I experienced so much pain mentally and emotionally, sometimes even physically, that you felt like, well, is it ever going to get better? What am I going to do now? Because
Mhm.
I'm very unhappy with the way things are going. But yeah, you do really need to persevere if you're in that situation, because when you do, like, I would go through that all again in a heartbeat, knowing what I know now. But at the time, I was like, no, take me back to when I was
I
living
think best
before.
of luck, David. I'm not going down that path again. Just
No,
joking.
I mean, I would do it, and I'm sure you would too, because you know what it's been like since.
And because the awakening is really
It
beautiful.
was very
I mean,
tough, but
yeah, it's tough, and then it's so beautiful when you go through it. I've had so many friends already that have, and yeah, especially in the last year or so, and they all can attest to that. It's a dark period where they, they became, they stayed back. They wanted to only be by themselves, um, and then they come out and everything's so much brighter. And when you see, and you're right, there's so many different layers. I thought I was like, oh, I'm good, I'm enlightened and awake, and
mm-hmm. Yeah.
10 years later, I was like, the universe is like, here you go, here's something else. And I was like, oh no.
Yeah, it's funny. You think that after you've had that initial boost, because there are two times in my life where I can think of where I felt very different.
Mm-hmm.
One, literally just waking up one morning, I felt it was in the UK just before I was about to leave to come back to Australia, and I just felt this huge surge of confidence and certainty and energy. I think my energy was activated, and then in that moment, I felt like I was awake. But then I found out pretty quickly, well, not quickly, but later on, down 2 years later, that I wasn't really awake at all. I thought I was. Uh, so yeah, you can have these times where you think, all right, life's awesome. How do I? Nothing can go wrong now, and then something else happens. And even though you are awake, you're still going to face those challenges. You're still going to face normal life challenges. But I just think that I guess things just flow better. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And
when you're in tune and in harmony with the universe,
things don't necessarily, perhaps challenges that you faced in the past are not really challenges these days. It's like it's a whole new set of challenges. What are your thoughts on that?
It's definitely different, because like things like let me give you, I'm trying to give examples, like how I see things now, I resolve them so much different. Like, so some, like if my car got towed or something, I get like worried or pissed off, or you know what I mean, because sometimes it's like $400 when I know this might not be a good example, but now it's just more like you just go with the flow. Like you don't have so much resistance to it, because when you have resistance, that's when everything like starts to pull up. I don't know if that was like a really good example, but
maybe choose a different one.
Okay, I choose a different one. Could you edit that one?
Yeah.
I don't know, like sometimes like I love having these conversations because they're so deep, but sometimes it's so hard to find like the words. But when you are so much more in tune, and it takes a series of different things. Like for me, it was meditating, but if I tried to meditate 5 years before, I can't say that I would have the same experience.
Mm-hmm.
But challenges, it's different. Like I see it so much differently now. Like it's not as like it doesn't take me as deep. Like I don't go far like into an abyss.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you learn to see and like either accept things faster, and then recover from them faster, because the way that you see life is so much different now, where things are, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where like we're always held to always think that, a career gives us a certain status. And when you get past that and you realize that it's not that, then you're never bound to those things anymore. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, a lot of people do define themselves by their career, and I think that could have been part of what threw me into the spiritual awakening, because when I just gave up accounting, a part of my identity had died or was in jeopardy, should I say, in many ways. And I think that also, I think is multifaceted. It's probably not just that decision that I made, but a bunch of other things also that kind of kicked me into into the caterpillar phase, I would say, of, again, of the cocoon phase, of the spiritual awakening, because it is very tough. But then,
And then, I'm sorry.
no, you're right. And then when you do, I guess, emerge from the cocoon, it's like the world's completely different,
Yeah. Another thing too was like having, and I don't think you can completely die, but can you tell the difference between your ego now and your spiritual side? Like you're able to identify it faster. Or another thing is like you're more in tune, you're more intuitive, like you can feel things faster, and it's like you feel it even in the body. It's different when you've cleared, like what you were saying, when you've cleared your chakras. That's why people go into meditation, because there's prayer, and then there's also listening. So for me, another thing was like getting huge downloads. And
Yeah.
I know you're going to say, how do you explain what a download is?
No, I'd love to know more about these downloads, because I've heard lots of people, especially in the last year, talk about different downloads that they get, in varying degrees or for different reasons. And I'd love to know, is it a thing that you do when you're awake, or is it something when you do when you're meditating, or is it something, how does it all work?
So in some cases, a download almost can feel like an epiphany, or in some cases, it could even feel like pain. Like there was a series like January of 2020, like everything felt really like hazy, where I was just sleepy. And then like my cousin was going through one too, but she had headaches. So that's why they say like those can be spiritual downloads, because there's a lot of what they say is like energetic, like frequencies that are activating in your body. And so your body's trying to make room for it. But again, it's so hard. Some people might say, oh, I just have a headache, but when you're on a spiritual path, like you're so in tune with your body, you just know like certain things aren't, So there are periods throughout like 2020, I would just be really tired, or like I'll have headaches, but then, but when I was okay, or I came out of it, it was just so much more clear, certain things. It's like you can understand things better. It's like the universe could talk to you without talking to you. You just get it.
Yeah, it's like a knowing. It's like,
Yeah, exactly.
It's a knowing, and you can't really explain it.
That doesn't feel like it's analyzed.
Yeah.
Or does that make sense? Everyone's gonna be like, these two.
No, I can resonate with the headaches. I mean, ever since, like, I had my first migraine ever when I first started working full time back in 2007, and then I maybe got like one a year, one every couple of years or something. But I stopped getting them until probably 2016, when things started, really kind of kicking in spiritually. Ever since then, like I got 2017 or 2018, a lot of migraines, and I thought it was just because I was stressed out and stuff, but I still get them these days, and they'll just happen. Like literally last week, I was meditating. I just finished meditating, and then I got this migraine, and it starts off as a little thing for me, it's always a vision thing, and so it's really, at least I know that they're coming on. So I know that's happening, and what I usually do is just go on YouTube and get some migraine binaural beats or something, and then listen to them and just lie there, and usually it goes away, and I don't experience a really bad headache. But I think it's something to do with obviously it's an energy, but I think that there's something to do with a spiritual side of things there with the migraine as well.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts or experiences?
Yeah, I mean, like I haven't had to the degree of like headaches, like really bad, like migraines. But when I started becoming more in tune with my body, I would, because my go-to was always like Advil or ibuprofen, and then I just
love the big pharma medicine.
not anymore. And so I just, they say everything from the earth heals, or we can heal our bodies naturally. And to be honest, I mean, like ever since probably like September, October of 2019, I wasn't sick. And they say like when you're so in tune and you're vibing so high, like you can't get sick, because energy can't get stuck in you. That's why people like get sick or have cancer, because it's all this projected energy and you don't know how to release it. So that's why, you can do it on your own consciously, but it's going to take a lot of effort. That's why it's really nice to have, maybe even Reiki sessions or energy healers, because they can help remove like stagnant energy in the body, and then and then it's up to you in your daily meditation practice to keep your body clear, and you're grounding energy, because remember, energy is everything and everywhere, and so there's projections. That's why I was like sharing with you, sometimes there might be times like you either in a panic or anxiety or don't feel good. It might not even be you, it's just projected energy.
Yeah.
Or the collective around you, right? And that's big this year, or 2020 I should say, because everyone was panicking, everyone was worried.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay?
Absolutely.
The people who did best were the ones that didn't watch mainstream media.
Yeah, it's so funny because I never watched it even before. Well, barely ever watched the news. I watched more news last year than probably the whole 20 years before that, just because I wanted to. It was interesting to see what they're saying versus what I'm hearing from other sources, and just I guess the lies of propaganda that they were pushing was just quite interesting to see the dynamic.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I want to ask you, because when I was back in 2018, when I didn't really know anything about spirituality, I didn't really know that it took me to about 2019 till I realized what had happened, that I'd had a spiritual awakening.
Yeah.
I was visiting the Gold Coast and I stayed with a friend of mine, and she goes, you're quite, you're very spiritual. And I was like, really? I didn't even know. And I think that's one of the biggest problems that I think most people have, is that they don't know that they're spiritual beings. They don't know that, because I was kind of just wrapping my head around it at that point, and clearly I didn't know something else. Somebody else saw something in me that I didn't see, but
we're all spiritual beings having a physical
yeah,
experience. Just that not everyone's recognized it yet or understands it. And I think a lot of those people that haven't had that awakening is because there's too much in their head and their mind and their ego. But what's really sad is they can't even decipher that. They don't even know anything other than that. They don't understand that there's a complete spirit side to you, and then there's the mind and the ego.
Yeah. Yes, it's why they call liquor. That's why they call it spirits, because it steals your spirit. And the word alcohol is actually I think it's an Arabic term, which is derived from alcohol, which is the translation is body eating spirit. So it's interesting, because when you see people when they're drunk and they've got like glassy eyes, because their souls kind of left them in that moment. And what's even worse is when, like, I was in an elevator once and I saw these two people get in, and I looked at one of their guy's eyes and he was just glassy, and he wasn't drunk or anything. He was just going to work. But that's one of the biggest problems, I think, or the biggest things that people face on a daily basis, is going to jobs that they don't like and they're unfulfilled, and they're literally selling their soul for money. And I was there for a very long time, and so much so that their soul's kind of gone. They got this glassy look in their eye, because the eyes are the gateway to the soul. So yeah, it's really interesting noticing that, and really feeling for this person, because he's kind of just wasn't, he was all just dead. He's kind of like dead inside at that point.
And there are people, can't you imagine? I was just having that conversation with a friend this afternoon. I was just like, and people can do this their whole lives, like stay at a job and like be just completely committed to it and think that that's life. But life is just, I think it's made to be so much more. Like we're made to be like expressive and creative creatures, and we all have gifts and talents. I don't think that there's anyone that doesn't have something. It's just, if they don't feel like they do, it's buried deep inside, because they have things that you like and love.
Yeah, it's been suppressed on purpose. It's the reason why the school system is set up the way it is. It's very, we can go deep into the school system and all of that. that stuff, but they've suppressed creativity on purpose, I believe. Because how many people do you know? Like, I think that, when you leave school, you should have enough knowledge to be able to pick a career that you're going to enjoy, not just to kind of pick a cookie cutter type, you know what I mean, career. And it's different these days in 2020 than it was when I left school. But, because the internet wasn't really what it is today. And there's a lot more knowledge out there. But at the same time, the school system hasn't changed really in 20 years, So a little bit has changed, but not really. There haven't been enough big changes ever since inception, pretty much, with the school system, to roll with the times and to roll with people awakening. And that's not really an accident.
Right? Like, we're designed to go to school from like kindergarten or like 5, 6 years old, and then like learn all these subjects, and we thinking it's feeding us. But I had this conversation with another friend too, was like, we all have things that we're good at, like whether some people are really good at math, but what if we just did that, right? How much more could we become better at doing that? And we embrace what each person has as a gift. So you're going to have the best mathematicians in the world, but yet, you're going to have the best musicians in the world. But yet we're taught to like do all of this, like go to school, like all the different subjects. And in most cases, it's like, I don't know. It's so hard to explain. We are conditioned from the time that we're young.
Yeah. I mean, it makes perfect sense that as a society, we would find the people who are most inclined to do a certain job, and then they do that job, rather than, you know what I mean, all these people just investing their time and energy into stuff they don't like and being mediocre at it, when we all have, we all came to this planet for different reasons. We all have different skill sets and personalities. Why not find out what those things are and then hone them and really unwrap the gift, so to speak? And,
Yes, I completely agree.
It makes for a much more efficient society.
Yeah. Or I know, like, a lot of my friends right now, if they have little kids, it's so hard to keep them in front of the computer, like paying attention. Like, they're better off being creative in the backyard and having imaginations. And we're taught to think that that's wrong. And yet, sometimes some of the most creative people like have the biggest imaginations. Like,
yeah, kids do have vivid imaginations, and I think one of the best things that you can do as an adult is to follow the dream that you had when you were a kid, whatever that is, because that's the thing that came to your head in that moment. Whether it's an astronaut or an actor or a musician or a writer or whatever it is, follow that dream, because those are the dreams that get crushed, unfortunately.
They are the dreams that get crushed. That's why, they say another big part of spiritual growth is doing inner child work.
Yeah, it's definitely something that definitely something that I've got to get going.
There's so many things off.
Yeah,
there's a lot of inner child work.
Well, yeah, it's funny that you mentioned the child, because when I was experiencing the turnaround of the bad year, in 2018, and I was doing a lot more music, I actually felt like a kid again. There were days where I just felt like a kid again, and it was just amazing. I couldn't explain it, but I was just like pretty much on cloud 9, like
right?
Yeah.
Or you just think about it, like when you're with your friends and you just act like, you just have so much fun and you just act like kids. Those are like the best moments. When I'm with like my girlfriends from elementary school, and we realize we're adults now, but like, we'll have a girls' weekend or something, and we just, you know what I mean? You just have fun, you act like kids, and that's where like these higher vibrations are, or that's it's a big part of it. Personal development. I mean, there were exercises that do inner child work, or act like you're 3 years old, or you know what I mean? It's those things that happen to us, or what we call like bad experiences, that stop us from doing a lot of things, right? And then it plays out in multiple situations as we go through life.
So, well, I think that might be a really good place to end it here, Lisa. I want to thank you for coming on. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me, David.
No problem. It was a great conversation, and I think people will get a lot out of it. So if people wanted to get in touch with you or check out your podcast, where's the best place to do that?
Yeah, so you can check out my website, which is www.8billionproject. So that's spelled out EIGHT project, 8billionproject.com.
Mhm.
And then I can be found on Facebook and Instagram. So if you guys want to get in touch with me for the podcast, you can find me on those platforms as well.
Fantastic. And we'll leave links to all of those down below in the description as well. So that is the end of the first episode of the David Cowan Show. Thank you for joining me. And thank you once again, Liza.
Thank you.
Take care.
You too.